It's National Police Week, and I've been sitting here with this for a few days now, just trying to figure out what I actually wanted to say. Because there's a version of this you see everywhere this week. The posts, the badges, the thin blue lines, the tributes. And I don't want to minimize any of that because it matters. But what I want to talk about is something that doesn't get said enough. And it's not about the tribute part. It's about the other real part. The part that happens after the ceremony, when everyone goes home, when the cameras are gone, when it's just you and whatever you're carrying. And that's what I want to talk about today. My name is Brent Beavers. For those of you who don't know me, I am a veteran and former law enforcement officer who was shot in the line of duty in 2011 in the face and throat with an AK-47. I survived, obviously. I'm here. But here's what I want you to understand about that sentence, I survived. And it sounds like a victory, and in one sense it is. But surviving and being okay are two completely different things. And for a long time, I had one without the other. There's a wall in Washington, D.C. that many brothers and sisters in blue are visiting this week. The National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. And on that wall, there are names, thousands of names. Officers who didn't come home. I've stood at that wall. I've run my fingers across names I didn't know. Names carved into stone. Men and women who put on the same uniform I did and didn't get to take it off one last time and go home to their family. I've thought about the ones who knew them, their partners, their families, the guys who were on shift with them that day and drove home and they didn't. And then there were names on that wall that I did know personally. Officers who were alive when I was shot. People I served with personally. People who came home after me in the years following my incident and didn't make it during their own. I ran my fingers across those names too, multiple times. And that is a different kind of weight because I know their families. I know the people who loved them. I've looked those people in the eyes. Some of them might be listening to me right now. And standing there at that wall, I felt two things at the same time that really don't want to coexist. I want to honor them. I want to stand there and say their sacrifice mattered and that their name deserves to be on that wall and their legacy deserves to be carried forward. That with everything in me. That's the choice I make every single day, to do everything I can to honor what they gave. That is how I try to make my being here mean something. Because the guilt doesn't go away because you make that choice. Because the truth is, you stand there and some part of you asks the question you can never fully answer. Why them and not me? And there's probably someone that hears my voice right now who's been in their own major incident who has that guilt. And I'm telling you, you have to make the choice. And it might not go away, the guilt, but the choices stand every day. There's no clean answer to that. You can speak to purpose all you want. And I do believe in purpose. I deeply believe in it. But it doesn't dissolve the guilt. It just gives you something to do with it. And that is the most honest thing I can tell you about survivor's guilt. You don't fix it. You choose what to do with it. And that choosing is a daily act, not a one-time decision. My name almost went on that wall. I said I survived. What I haven't said yet is how close I got afterward. Because I also own a comically long list of traumas from that day and beyond, and really even before that incident. I'm not the only one. Because it wasn't just the shooting in my case. The shooting was just one day, one bad shift. And I'm a walking testament to the grace of God. What came after it was years. And I'm grateful for those years, hard or not. But after I was shot, the support I truly needed wasn't there. I eventually had to file a lawsuit just to get any kind of mental help. And I was lucky I had a physical injury to go along with it, or I would have gotten nothing. And I want to be clear about something because this matters to me. That lawsuit wasn't about going after the agency. It wasn't about pointing fingers or attacking the people I served alongside. Some of the men I considered brothers were angry at me that I was doing that. And I understood the loyalty, I really did. But that wasn't what it was. Really, it was about survival. It was about a man who had been injured, who had no idea what he needed, no idea what to ask for, how to ask for it, no idea where to go, and who was watching his life come apart at the seams while everyone around him, including the institution he had given himself to, looked away. And I want to say something about that looking away, because I've spent a lot of time sitting with this, and I don't believe it was necessarily malicious on anyone's part. I really don't. Maybe a few, but most, no. What I believe is that agencies and governments are operating inside of a legal liability structure that is so complicated, so loaded, that the safest move for the institution is just to almost always pull back, to manage exposure, to let the process handle itself. And the process was never designed to restore a person. It was designed to manage risk. And I've said often, if I died, they knew how to deal with that. But living, they had no idea. So in that case, the officers left standing in the middle of something nobody trained them for, surrounded by a system that is technically responding, but practically leaving them alone. And nobody in that system is sitting at a table somewhere twisting their mustache and deciding just to destroy somebody. Not most of the time, even though it might look like it sometimes. It's just what happens when legal liability meets human suffering and the legal liability wins. And there's no dollar amount that fixes that. That's the part people just don't understand from the outside. In my case, and probably many others, the isolation was crippling. Sitting in that alone without language for it, without access to anything real, without anyone stepping in and saying, we see you and we are not going to let you go through this by yourself. That silence does damage that outlasts the original injury. I want to say something else here that I truly mean. There were people who came forward. There were individuals, not the institution per se, but people who reached out and who showed up in some form, and I am genuinely thankful to some of them to this very day. That mattered. I don't want to stand here and make it sound like there was nothing, because that's not the truth. But a lot of them faded away too, because you're just supposed to be okay. And I have to be honest about why in some cases. A lot of it was my own doing. Because the same culture I'm describing, the same mythology I'm pushing back against right now had me. It had me convinced that needing people was a problem, that accepting help consistently was weakness, that the right move was to manage it myself, to self-isolate, to keep the real version of what I was going through locked behind closed doors as much as possible, that I told myself I can just open later. Later just kept getting pushed back. And I got to a place I should have never gotten to. But even at my local memorial, a law enforcement memorial, when I should have been on myself. And there was a point in my life that I was at that memorial in the process of attempting to end my own life. Right there, in front of names just like mine. At the time, there was a space that was calling my name. It has later on been filled by others who gave the ultimate price. I shouldn't have gotten there. And I want to be careful about how I say this, because I don't believe it was any single person's fault. What there was a collective looking away, a system-wide, culture-wide, career-wide agreement that we do just not talk about this stuff. That toughness means silence, being stoic at all times. That the badge and what it cost you are two separate things. And you keep that separation locked tight, and you never let anybody see behind the door. Because that mythology, that understanding of what toughness is supposed to look like, that is what almost killed me. Not necessarily one person or even the culture. Now, I want to be fair about something here, too. Institutionally, it is getting better. Not fast enough, and not the way it needs to be. But over the last 15 years, there have been some real movement, real people and real organizations that have stood up and said, this is a problem and we're going to try to change it. Peer support programs, legislation, mental health initiatives inside agencies I've seen, more voices in the public space talking openly about what this job actually does to people. I see it. I acknowledge it. And the people doing that work deserve credit. But here's what I also see. The barriers are still there. I saw some legislation in my home state that's failed recently that is just laughable. The fundamental thing that underlies all of this, that mythology of toughness, that cultural agreement that you cannot be seen struggling, that showing anything other than strength is an invitation for people to question whether you belong in the role or not, that is still deeply embedded. And that's even past institutional. That's a officer to officer problem. And it's going to take each of us to fix that. The culture shifts at the level of programs and policy in a very slow manner, but it is shifting. But here we are. And you end up with this gap. You have the agencies that are at face value making moves. They have the EAPs, they have the peer support teams, they have the chaplains, they have the resources posted on the wall in the break room. And the officer who needs it doesn't use any of it because the culture underneath the program still says that if you are using it, it makes you a liability. Still says that if you're seen walking into that office, it's a conversation that will follow you. It still says the strength that is the price of belonging, and the moment you look like you can't handle it, you're one step closer to losing the thing that your entire identity is wrapped up in. The programs are real. The barrier is real. Both things are true. Agencies and governments, I think most of them, at least from an individual standpoint, generally want to get this right, if nothing else for public perception. But they are also navigating a legal and liability landscape that is generally complicated. And when you're an institution trying to protect the institution, the instinct is to create distance from the problem, not proximity to it. That instinct costs officers their lives, not because anyone wanted it to, because it's a byproduct of a system doing what systems do. I don't know all the right answers. I want to say that plainly. I'm not sitting here with a perfect solution, but I know the wrong ones. I have lived the wrong ones. I know what it looks like when a person is left alone inside something too big to carry with nothing but bad options and a culture that punishes them for admitting it. That is the wrong answer every time. I want to make a comparison that I think matters, and I want to make it carefully because I respect both lanes. We talk about deployment, our veterans. We honor our military. We understand, in a cultural sense at least, that going to war does something to a person. That seeing what soldiers see, doing what soldiers do, carrying that weight across multiple deployments over years has consequences. We have the language for that now. Clinically, it's called PTSD. I personally don't think it's a disorder. I think it's an injury, but that's for another conversation. We have programs for it. It's not perfect, but at least we're acknowledging it and working towards it. Here's what we don't say enough. Law enforcement is a deployment. At most agencies, every single day. You put on that uniform and you go out into a world that at best is indifferent to you, and at worst actively trying to kill you. You respond to the worst moments of other people's lives over and over and over again. Domestics, overdoses, fatalities. Things that no human being was designed to absorb without consequence. And then you go home. And you're supposed to just be a husband or wife, a parent, a neighbor, normal. The military at least gets a reintegration process, imperfect as it is. Law enforcement gets a shift change. That is a gap. That is a problem. And nobody wants to say it out loud because saying it feels like weakness. And in this world, weakness is the one thing that's not allowed to be shown. And this is not just about major incidents. I also want to talk about something called allostatic load. I'm going to say it in plain language because I'm not a clinician, but your body has a stress response. This affects everyone. When something threatening happens at work or personal life, it fires. Cortisol, adrenaline, the whole system goes hot. And that is good in this line of work. That is what kept you alive on a traffic stop that went sideways. That is biology doing exactly what it's supposed to do. But the system was designed to fire and then recover. What happens to a law enforcement officer is that system fires, and it fires, and it fires, and it fires, year after year, and the recovery time gets shorter and shorter until at some point, for a lot, it's not really recovering at all anymore. It's just running hot all the time. That build up, that total load on your system is the allostatic load. And here's what it does over time. It changes your sleep. It changes how you process emotions. It changes your relationship to risk and anger and calm. It changes how you connect with the people you love. It changes who you are in ways so gradual that you don't even notice until someone who loves you points it out. And even then you argue with them because from the inside, for a lot, it feels normal. That's not a character flaw either. This is biology responding to an impossible operating environment over a sustained period of time. But a lot of times, it eventually spills over. Actually, every time. Eventually, it will spill over. And the spill is what destroys careers, marriages, lives. I need to put some numbers on the table here. More law enforcement officers in this country die by suicide than die in the line of duty by gunfire and accidents combined. Let that sit for a second. We dedicate an entire week to honoring officers killed in the line of duty, and we should. Those sacrifices are real and they matter. But there is a larger, quieter casualty count that doesn't get a wall, doesn't get a ceremony, doesn't get a week. The officer who made it home every shift for 20 plus years and then didn't even survive their own living room. We don't talk about that one. And the reason we don't talk about it is the same reason it keeps happening. Culture says you don't talk about it. Let me describe the position these officers are in, because I've lived in it. You're struggling. You know you're struggling. Some part of you knows that what you've been carrying has gotten too heavy, but you can't say anything at work, because if you say anything at work, it goes into a file somewhere. And that file affects whether you keep your badge in some cases, whether you stay on the street, whether your career, your identity, the thing you've given your whole self to survives. So you don't say anything at work. And for a lot at home, they can't say anything either, because the people who love them are already worried, already scared for them every shift they go out. And if you tell them how bad it actually is, you're either going to terrify them or start a conversation you don't know how to finish. So you don't say anything at home either. And then you've got to find somewhere to let it go. Many choose alcohol. Many say it works. For a few hours, it actually works. The edge comes off, the replays slow down, you can breathe, and then it stops working and you need more. And then one day you realize that you've been drinking every single night for 3 years and you can't explain to your wife or anyone else why you need it. And if she's angry and stopped asking, and the distance between you two grows, and it has become something you can't even see across anymore. Or you get angry. I've seen that one a bunch. Because at least anger feels like something you can hold. Depression is shapeless. Anxiety is shapeless. But anger, it has edges. Anger feels like control until it shows up in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong person, and it costs you everything. Or you can just go numb. That was my favorite. You can just shut the whole thing off. There's actually lots of medications designed for that. Another conversation. You stop feeling anything at all, and you think that's management. But the people around you who are watching someone they love disappear in real time, and they don't know what to do with the shell that's left. This is where the divorce rates live, the highest of any profession, to my knowledge. This is where the vices live. This is where men and women who spent their entire careers protecting other people end up unable to protect themselves or their families from what the job did to them. And nobody in the culture gave them permission to say any of it, because saying it meant losing the one thing their whole identity was built on, that badge. The badge is a strange thing to carry for a long time. At some point, you stop knowing where the badge ends and you begin. The job stops being what you do and becomes who you are. And when the thing that is who you are is also the thing that is slowly destroying you, where do you go with that? You stay. You white knuckle it. You push through. Because the alternatives is losing yourself. Except you're already losing yourself. Just slowly in some cases. And without anyone else's permission. That's the actual position these officers and many first responders are in. And it is killing them. Slowly or quickly, it is killing them. I survived that memorial. I survived that night. And I started doing the only thing I knew how to do, which was try to understand it. I have since studied countless hours I dug into what happens to people under sustained stress and trauma. I looked at the science. I looked at my faith. And what I found that those two things, when you look honestly at both of them, point to the same thing more often than not. Something started forming out of all of it. A framework that I eventually named the TRB method. Truth, responsibility, becoming. It's not therapy. It's not a clinical protocol. A way of thinking built from the inside of the experience by someone who lived it for the people who are living it. The framework eventually grew into what has now become the TRB Hope Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit, our Tribe Hope platform, and some programs we run called Operation Restore. And I want to tell you why I built it, because I think the why matters. These services are free. The program is free. What I ask is that you reach out and you give it a chance, because I know what it's like to have nothing left in the tank. I have built this because I believe with everything I have left, after everything I have been through, that the reason I am still here is not luck. I believe it is a calling, and I believe that God has left me standing for a reason, and that reason is this work. To be a voice, to be an advocate, to be in whatever broken and imperfect way I can manage, the hands and feet of something much bigger than myself towards the people who do these jobs and deserve better than what they've been given. There is no ultimate win here. There is no finish line I'm running towards where I can get to stand up and say I'm done. That's for God to decide. The need doesn't stop. The officers keep coming, and I'm thankful for every single one. But the weight keeps accumulating. The culture changes slowly, if at all. So it's going to take all of us, everyone that has worn, is wearing, or will wear a badge across all first responder avenues and veterans. But every person who gets through, every officer who finds a way to stay and get real and start the process of becoming something on the other side of what they've been carrying, that is this whole thing. That is everything. I am still in the becoming myself. I want to be honest about that. I have not arrived anywhere. I am still pushing through things. I still carry the names on that wall. I still feel the weight of the ones I knew personally, of their families, of the question I can never fully answer. But I am here, and I am doing something with it every day. That's the choice. If you're a law enforcement officer, but really any first responder, any veteran, or the general public, if you're watching this and something I said landed somewhere real with you, I want you to go to jointribehope.org, look at Operation Restore, and if you're a first responder, look at Operation Restore Heroes. You can also go to trbhopefoundation.org. It was built for your world, with your language, for the things you have been carrying that you haven't been able to find a place to put it down. It's online. You can be anonymous. Nobody at your department finds out you were there. No file, no flag, no mandatory reporters, no career risk. Just a place to start being honest about where you actually are, and then a way forward from there. This is National Police Week, and I honor the names on that wall with everything I have. And I honor the officers who are still here and struggling with everything I have too. You don't have to keep doing this alone.